In this presentation, Petr Kuzmin will address what legacy did Alexei Navalny leave for the Russian opposition. That's question number one. Question number two, what are the immediate and long-term impacts of Navalny's death? Peter, who is the official representative of Team Navalny in Australia, will also present his argument of why Alexei Navalny is the most important politician of the 21st century in Russia. Following the presentation, there will be an opportunity for questions and discussion. So a bit of background on Peter. Petr Kuzmin is the official representative of the Anti-Corruption Foundation established by Alexei Navalny to investigate corruption within the Russian state, and he was appointed in 2011. The ACF has become the biggest pro-democracy political organization in Russia. Its staff was forced into exile in 2021 when it was designated an extremist organization by Putin's kangaroo court. Petr Kuzmin is a Russian-Australian anti-war activist and one of the founders of a grassroots pro-democracy movement, the
Svoboda Alliance. Svoboda means freedom in Russian.
Freedom. Okay, good. Alliance here in Australia and New Zealand, and it sprang up organically in both of those countries in the wake of protests that swept Russia in 2021 upon Alexei Navalny's return and subsequent arrest. He became a coordinator of the @Free Navalny campaign in Australia in May 2023 and remains the official representative of Navalny's team here in Australia. So having said all that, I'll hand over to you, Peter, and thanks for agreeing to do this. It's a great opportunity. Yep.
Thanks a lot for the invitation to Humanist Australia, and Vince and Leslie. And also thank you for joining the anti-war protest on Princess Bridge the other week.
Yes.
Greatly appreciate it.
Thank you.
So let me share my screen. So in my talk today, there will be quite a bit of history and only a few thoughts at the end about the future direction. I wouldn't claim to know what will happen in Russia, how events will develop, but I do know what impact Alexei Navalny has made on the Russian people. And I want to start this presentation just by showing what the response was to Alexei Navalny's death on the 16th of February. The news arrived here in Australia at the end of day on Friday, and immediately the next day, dozens of people just showed up in various places, in various cities around Australia. And so this was in Melbourne on Princess Bridge. This is in Sydney. Lots of people made their own signs, made banners like this, and the emotion. I myself was taken aback by the emotion that people felt, how much Alexei Navalny meant to them. Most people who live here in Australia, they've never met Navalny. Many people have lived here for many years. I myself have been here since 2006, but he made an incredible impact on people's lives and people's imaginations, and that was visible in the way people responded. So these makeshift memorials appeared. One on the left is in Sydney, the one on the right is here in Princess Bridge, and people just kept on bringing more flowers, more pictures, and these memorials lasted for well over a month. They just kept on being refreshed, cleared away by city authorities, and then being refreshed. And you could see he meant a lot to people in Russia as well. Putin's regime was afraid that the funeral itself will become a demonstration, and they tried to bury Navalny in secret. And there was an immense public campaign was necessary to put enough pressure on the regime to make them return the body to the mother. And eventually, the funeral took place almost 2 weeks after his death in Moscow, and thousands and thousands of people came, despite threats, despite risk of being arrested, but people still showed up. And more than a month later, so this is how Alexei Navalny's grave looks like. It's literally a mound of flowers, because people still keep on coming, keep on expressing their respect and really, just expressing how much he meant for them. And I'll say a few words about my own personal story, how I met Alexei Navalny and how I became his supporter. So I was born in the Soviet Union. I grew up in Russia, and I was extremely apolitical during those times. That in the 90s, it seemed there was lots of violence, there was lots of chaos, and there was a perception that the politicians, they don't work for the people, they only work for getting power and enriching themselves. So I was apolitical, and I despised all politicians. Later on, I had a chance to go to the States, studied there for 7 years, and eventually came to Australia in 2006. But I was still following life in Russia and politics, and I came across Alexei Navalny's blog in 2010, and he really impressed me with his wit, with his humor, and his common sense approach. But he was full of energy and vigor, and he really kind of made people curious and inspired people. And so I, over the years, I started supporting his various projects and following his work. And every time I would go to Russia, I would try to visit his office. So one time, 7 years ago, I just showed up at his office, and he happened to be there, and he took me into his office and talked to me for 20 minutes. I was just a Russian guy from Australia, but he was so extremely genuine and open that it really confirmed my belief that this is a type of politician that is unique. It's a unique politician, and he deserves my support. So and eventually I became the representative of Alexei Navalny's team last year. Unfortunately. So that's my own personal story, just to emphasize that even people who spent decades literally outside of Russia, they still connected this. They were still inspired by his vision for what Russia is and what politics can be. So there are a few things that I want to emphasize in my talk today, and so about Alexei Navalny. Who is he? First and foremost, for me, he is a visionary grassroots politician. He advocated for significant reforms for fair and transparent elections. He advocated for judicial independence, for the human rights. But this is common for democratic opposition in Russia. What makes him unique is that he was able to engage with the ordinary Russian people. His focus was always on the ordinary people, and he was able to mobilize them towards the common goal. He utilized social media platforms in an amazing way, unlike any other politician before him. And that was another way of his connection. He was denied access to mass media, but he created his own media in his YouTube channel. So he was endlessly inventive and always full of ideas, and always found ways of connecting with the people. He is also an anti-corruption campaigner. That's how people know him. He really identified that corruption is not incidental in Russia. It's really at the core of the system that exists. Corruption serves the so-called vertical of power that Putin has created. That vertical of power is it's basically you have the appointees, Putin's appointees in state corporations, in the regional governments. They have an opportunity to take bribes as long as they ensure that during elections Putin gets a really good result, or his party gets a really good result. Corruption permeates government bureaucracy at every level, but it all serves the purpose of making Putin's power more centralized, I guess. It all serves that. And Alexei Navalny identified this problem within our system of government. It wasn't just about money, it was about power, it was about how the state's resources are being used. And he made it the core of his activity. And he was able to reveal that corruption for millions of Russians, and really reveal the hypocrisy that permeates propaganda, official statements of the politicians and Putin himself. So ultimately, he is viewed as Putin's fiercest opponent. So Alexei Navalny was persecuted very early on. His first conviction on Trump charges was in 2013 already. His brother was also arrested, and his brother was sent to prison and spent 3.5 years as a hostage. But Alexei Navalny still kept on fighting. When he was placed under house arrest, that didn't stop him. When he was poisoned, famously in 2020, that didn't stop him as well, and he kept on putting pressure on Putin's regime, and we can see how much problems he created for Putin's regime just through the response of Putin's response. So basically, there is no other political organization that was designated as an extremist. So that's the same designation as Al-Qaeda or Islamic State. It shows how threatening that political organization was for Putin, and the fact that Alexei Navalny was poisoned and then eventually killed. That's an indication of the threat that he posed. So I think to really appreciate Alexei Navalny and his contribution to Russian politics and Russian society, I think it's necessary to look at him in the context of Russian political history. Russia is a very young and unfortunately, fundamentally corrupted democracy. There was a brief period when there was a flourishing, the birth of democracy, but then very quickly it began to be corrupted, and now we have a full-blown autocracy in Russia. So a few milestones. In 1991, Boris Yeltsin he emerged as the first democratic leader of Russia, and he did that have popular support. And he was the first politician in the Soviet Union, Russia, who really was trying to connect with ordinary people. He was very publicly against communist privileges. He was talking about the plight of the common people, and there was lots of hope placed in Boris Yeltsin. And as part of democratization of Russia, the other side of story are the market reforms. And the market reforms and privatization, the way they started, the way they took place, unfortunately, that was one of the significant contributions to corruption of democracy, because very quickly a class of oligarchs emerged in Russia who became really powerful players. And Boris Yeltsin basically joined power with oligarchs to create this very pervasive system. But before that, in '93, there was a constitutional crisis where the parliament impeached Yeltsin over the market reforms and privatization, and in return, Yeltsin dissolved the parliament. There was a famous shelling of the White House, and the outcome of that was a new constitution that was passed, and that constitution made Russia into a super presidential republic. So basically, the president had the most power, and that was really the foundational stone of Putin's autocracy, unfortunately. In '96, that was the year when this marriage of the oligarchs and presidency happened. So Yeltsin had only a 3% approval rating, but oligarchs teamed up. They set aside their differences, and they joined the media power, the TV channels that they recently privatized, and managed to portray the election as this existential struggle between democracy and a return to totalitarianism, to communism. So the communist leader, Gennady Zyuganov, was portrayed as this new Stalin who would really bring back repressions. And so as a result of this, the use of the state resources and oligarchs' media resources and all the latest tricks of political technologists, Yeltsin was able to win, even though he suffered a heart attack literally a month before the second run of election. So what we have by the middle of the '90s, we already had a very corrupt system, and that system was all about consolidating power and maintaining that power. So Yeltsin, because of the way the privatization of state industries happened, he feared persecution. He feared that he would be sued after he is no longer president. So he needed a successor, and the oligarchs helped him find a successor, and that was Putin, as we all know. So fundamentally, what happened is Yeltsin betrayed democracy. Yeltsin, who was the the hope, this first democratic leader, he betrayed democracy because he chose his security, and not only security but also his family received millions as well from the oligarchs. So when Putin came to power, Putin was, again, the oligarchs helped elect Putin using the media. Putin then made this bargain with the oligarchs. Basically, they had to pledge their allegiance to him, and they could retain the riches. And those oligarchs who rebelled, Khodorkovsky, Berezovsky, they were either jailed or exiled. And at the same time, what happens, that period coincided with a really significant growth in the economy due to high oil prices. And Putin was able to get, again, using the media resources, and he was able to, his United Russia Party won a constitutional majority, which is significant because the constitution was again changed. So according to the Russian constitution, the president was allowed to be in office only for 2 terms, and that's how another successor was chosen. So instead of a democratic election, instead of a proper contest of successors, there was another succession planned. So Medvedev became this puppet president, and during his term, the constitution was changed to allow Putin to run again for another 2 terms. And during the last 2 terms, before the most recent election, Putin consolidated so much power that he became very aggressive, and he became more and more heavy-handed in the way he dealt with the opposition. So we have the annexation of Crimea. In 2018, Navalny was banned from presidential election. He wouldn't even contest it. In 2020, another change in the constitution, and Navalny was poisoned. In 2021, Navalny's organization was banned. 2022, as we know, this large-scale invasion of Ukraine took place, and within a month, all independent media, all remaining independent media, was banned and forced into exile. So this is the historical context that we, I think, is necessary to bear in mind when we talk about Alexei Navalny. So, what is the perception of politics in Russia for the vast majority of people? So people see that, people believe that the main actors are the Kremlin clans, the oligarchs, the media, and even parties and politicians. They're secondary to that. There are always these puppet masters who are really deciding everything, and that's what ultimately matters. All opposition parties and politicians are controlled behind the scenes by the Kremlin or the oligarchs. Elections are a sort of political theater. They're aimed at legitimizing the president or his ruling party in the eyes of the world and the Russian people. That's unfortunately that's what it is. And the consequence of this is that the ordinary people are very, very passive and apolitical. And they are constantly being manipulated by the media or social media troll farms, which are really quite pervasive. People are not vocal, and any excessive activity is being really repressed and punished. So this is kind of the political landscape that we have. But how is Putin able to maintain his control? So he managed to convince through his propaganda that stability is the ultimate sacred value. So Russian people have this historical memory of really significant traumatic breaks. So there was the revolution in 1917, but then the breakup of the Soviet Union and the 90s, they were quite traumatic for people as well. So the alternative that first Yeltsin and then Putin is offering the people is that they can guarantee stability. Proper democratic politics where there's a contest of ideas, it's too dangerous. You never know who is going to come to power. They constantly scare people with the specter of ultra-nationalists or communists. Some basically free and fair elections are dangerous because you don't know the outcome. You can have bad actors gaining power. In return, they're saying, well, we can guarantee you stability. And because of stability, you can focus on your family and your career. Just don't even worry about the public sphere, politics. Just we'll take care of, we'll create the conditions necessary for you to flourish. Loyalty to Putin and state is rewarded. Government bureaucracy is actually a very popular career path because it really, whereas here people might want to become, I don't know, lawyers or be in a tech startup. In Russia, the appeal of government bureaucracy is really significant. But it hinges upon loyalty to Putin. Opposing and criticizing regime is permitted only within prescribed boundaries. So Russia still tries to fool the outside world that it's a democracy, and that's why there are always multiple candidates. There are nominal opposition parties, but their opposition is really permitted only within certain boundaries. It's only as long as they play their part and know their place within this political theater. So what is democratic opposition? I want to give an example of this liberal democratic party, Yabloko. It's the most well-known, most established, and its leader, Grigory Yamitsky. So it was founded in 1993, and it won almost 8% of the vote for parliament. And this is was basically the party of the educated elites, the intelligentsia. For a decade, they were in parliament, but they gradually kept on losing their share of the vote. And eventually, in the latest parliamentary election, they were in 7th place with just 1.3%. They were playing this role the way they're portrayed by the propaganda, by Putin's propaganda, is that they're allowed to espouse all the values of liberal democracy, but then they become whipping boys in elections. And in the eyes of the ordinary people, it basically devalues the ideas that they bring to the table. So all of their criticism, and they can be very outspoken about Putin's regime, but they're completely insignificant and unthreatening to the regime. So they are permitted to remain there. The leader, Grigory Levinsky, first time when he ran for presidency, he received 7.5% of the vote. In 2000, it was 6%. In 2018, he played this role of a whipping boy for just 1%. And this is, and unfortunately, this has a very damaging effect on democratic ideas within Russia, among the ordinary people. So I want to contrast that with, so this is the setting, historical setting, and I want to contrast it with what Navalny's vision is and how he went about engaging and fighting against Putin's regime. So first part of his vision for Russia, it was aimed at dismantling the pervasive corruption within the Russian government and state-run corporation. The other element of his vision is that it's essential to revive democracy. Free and fair elections, judicial independence, protection of human rights, they're all extremely important. And he always emphasized that. He believed that Russia should become a parliamentary republic, not a super presidential republic with one person having the majority of power, but a parliamentary republic. He believed, he believed that it was necessary to shift the balance of power to a more representative and accountable form of government. In the famous documentary Navalny, he is asked, okay, well, what would you do if you become president? He says, well, I would take the power and I would just have it, reduce it by half. So he understood that this concentration was really damaging. The concentration of power that occurred within the Russian state was really damaging. And he really believed in European integration. He believed that Russia is a Western country and it can become a normal European democracy. And fundamentally, he was, throughout his life, he was advocating for this cultural shift within society towards democracy, transparency, and the rule of law. And I would also say civic participation, which is another essential element. So I want to contrast the traditional democratic opposition versus Navalny's strategy, how they went about. So traditional opposition, their communications focused on intelligentsia, the educated people, the educated class, people who already believe in liberal democratic values. Their communication channels are still state media. They try to get access to state media. They also use independent opposition media, but it's still it would be established media channels essentially. They largely focus on Moscow. They don't really organize public rallies, and they constantly appeal to the West as the source of power. They believe that only the pressure from the West can help transform Russia into a democratic country. Famously, Garry Kasparov, the chess champion, he is a Russian opposition leader. So he left Russia, I think, in 2011, 2012. So he has been in voluntary exile all this time. And he openly attacked Navalny, basically said that Navalny was legitimizing Russian politics, political system, whereas what's necessary is just a really concerted pressure from the West on Russia and forcing it to become democratic. And fundamentally, another important point is that traditional democratic opposition was willing to accept the rules set up by Putin's regime, and they weren't going outside the established lines. So to contrast that with Navalny's strategy, he preferred direct communication with the people and with all segments of society, regardless of education. That's why social media was so important for him. That's why he established several YouTube channels, and was doing regular streams. That direct communication was really important. He built, so rather than relying on state media or independent opposition media, and he didn't really have access to state media at all, so he built his own. So he started off with his LiveJournal blog, and that really set the foundation of his popularity. Then he established his YouTube channels. Next, unlike the focus on Moscow, he really focused on the whole country. He really believed that regional cities are important. The whole society is important. It's important to energize everyone. He focused on the corruption and hypocrisy over the regime. That was the cornerstone of his strategy. He was constantly mobilizing supporters and organizing rallies. And those rallies, not only in Moscow, but all over Russia. And he really, from early on, he emphasized that it is the people who are the source of power, not the wealthy elites, not the West. It is the people who ultimately have the most power. They just need to believe it themselves and discover it and join forces. And throughout his political career, Navalny was not satisfied with playing by the rules. He was constantly trying to disrupt the Kremlin's political theater. So really an important contribution that Navalny has made to Russian politics is he revitalized elections, revitalized electoral politics. So, for example, in 2007, before Navalny arrived on the stage, there were about four democratic opposition parties. All of them combined received less than 4% of the vote. And at the same time, Putin's United Russia Party wins 70% of the seats, constitutional majority. In 2011, Navalny starts a campaign against Putin's United Russia Party. He famously calls them the party of crooks and thieves. His team create really iconic logos. Like here you have United Russia Party logo at the top. It has a bear, and then the logo that Navalny's team created, it's a bear with a sack of goods, basically thieving bear. The campaign was so successful, his campaign was, he was encouraging people to vote for any party, doesn't really matter for which, but just vote against United Russia Party. And that was a very simple message, simple strategy, and it worked. It was a protest vote. And as a result of that, United Russia lost 27%, earned 27% fewer seats than before. That was a major blow. At the same time, tens of thousands of people participate as election monitors and document this fraud and vote manipulation, and mass protests arise in Moscow especially. And Navalny during this time emerges as the leader of the Russian opposition. So the next stage...
Sorry, Peter.
Yeah,
can I just interrupt? Just a point of clarification.
Yeah.
Is that why Putin stood as an independent in the last election? Because he's pulled out of the United
Yes.
Party, and that's the reason why.
And in 2018 as well, he also because the brand of the United Russia Party was so damaged that Putin has been distancing himself from it over the past few cycles. So yeah. So the next major milestone is Navalny's mayoral campaign in 2013. The story is amazing just because of a turnaround. So following 2011, Putin realizes how dangerous Navalny is, and trumped up charge is invented, and Navalny is convicted. But literally, he is sent to prison, but literally the next morning he is released from prison because mass protests in Moscow happen. And instead of going to prison, he is actually allowed to run for the mayor of Moscow. And the expectation was that Navalny would just be the whipping boy. He would be allowed to run, but without access to, without any money, without access to state media, mainstream media. He would not receive much. So he starts with just 3% rating 3 months before. He is denied access to mainstream media, but then he stages this massive grassroots campaign. So this is an image from one of the rallies that he staged in Moscow. He does 3 meetings, like goes basically yard to yard within district to district in Moscow. Has three mini rallies per day, and he finishes second with 30% of almost 30% of the vote, and almost forces a runoff. Incidentally, the numbers changed overnight, and it turns out that Putin's candidate gets 51%, but there's very strong suspicion of manipulation that resulted in. So the next major milestone is Navalny's presidential campaign in 2018. It's significant because for a number of reasons. It was a campaign of unprecedented scale. As I mentioned, most parties, they really focus on Moscow, St. Petersburg. They don't really have a massive nationwide kind of network of campaign offices. But what also makes his campaign amazing is that it was completely crowdfunded, and all of the donations had to go through the official state bank, and there was lots of focus on him, and even a minor infraction would have resulted in significant in prosecution, criminal prosecution even. So it had to be completely transparent. Again, he didn't have access to mass media. He had to do it all himself. He was constantly pressured by authorities, and he was attacked by provocateurs. I don't know if you remember, there was at one point an attacker threw toxic liquid, green liquid, into his face. So he was completely, he almost got blinded in one eye. Had to have an operation, but he still continued. So the whole campaign, it was almost a year and a half, but he was denied registration. by Putin's electoral commission. So just to illustrate the nationwide network, there were 81 campaign offices. There were almost 200,000 volunteers. That's really quite amazing. And then the crowdfunding and transparency. His team published all the reports, where they got the money, and how it was spent. There were 100,000 unique donors, 250,000 donations, and median donation was just $8, 8 Australian dollars. Again, this probably doesn't look that impressive from an Australian perspective, but the thing is, crowdfunding just never happened in Russia before. All campaign financing usually would be from wealthy oligarchs or companies. So it's interest groups would fund a candidate who would use that money to get into power and then pay back in benefits the donor. So here we had a completely transparent crowdfunded campaign for the first time in Russia. So Navalny was denied the ability to run for president, but he and really no other properly independent opposition politicians were allowed to run either after 2018. But he was still looking for ways of maintaining civic engagement, increasing civic engagement, and finding ways of disrupting the plans of the ruling regime. So in 2019, he invented the smart voting strategy. So I forgot to mention that Navalny tried to register a party 9 times and was denied. So he had to, but he still wanted to participate in this electoral politics. So what he did, he basically he invented a strategy. The purpose of the strategy was to defeat Putin's candidates. And the only way it's possible is by pooling votes. So his team would do research, identify which party, which candidate is more likely to challenge the incumbent, and they would recommend that basically put their support and publish a list of recommendations. And then people had an opportunity to consult the recommendations and help defeat the ruling candidate. They were extremely successful, these campaigns, given the circumstances, and they were successful in destabilizing the system to an extent. So in terms of Alexei's legacy, he taught Russian people civic engagement. We had this birth and flourishing of democracy in 1991, but then gradually people realized that the wealthy elites, the oligarchs, they just control too much, and people retreated into the private spaces and stopped engaging. But Alexei taught us to use our voice, really take action to further the interests through elections, through organizing grassroots organizations, he really encouraged people to, he created networks himself, but he also always supported other networks that rose, other groups that rose. He taught Russian people to try and hold the government to account, not succumb to subservient position. And he emphasized, even when he was in prison, even from prison, he still wrote texts encouraging Russian people to participate in elections and do it smartly, not fall for manipulations, but figure out a way that would create the most problems for the regime. And he famously said that it's not shameful to do little, it's shameful to do nothing. Anti-corruption activism, of course, another legacy. By now, everybody, I think millions of Russians, maybe not everybody, but millions of Russians understand that corruption is at the core of Putin's government. Corruption prevents free and fair election. And corruption allows the elites to exploit mineral resources and use the resources of the state and really treat the people as a resource themselves. And his anti-corruption activism also revealed how deeply hypocritical state propaganda is. And it's constantly working to cover up. Just to some examples of his, so corruption can be boring, but he actually managed to make the topic of corruption into entertainment as well. The documentaries that he created, they were so catchy, so lively, that literally they got millions of views. The famous one, Putin's Palace, it's been viewed 131 million times. This is like the highest viewed video in Russian history. The documentary about Dmitry Medvedev, 47 million times, completely destroyed Medvedev's political reputation. Yeah, and some other examples, really quite powerful. And almost every investigation that comes out, it becomes a talking point. The Russian internet is really talking about it. Putin's Palace, I would highly recommend this video. It's a 2-hour-long video. It's a proper feature-length documentary, but it's produced in such a professional, slick way that yeah, 131 million views. It's available with English subtitles, and this documentary talks not only about the palace, this completely ridiculous, gaudy palace that was constructed over the course of 15 years on the Black Sea, but it also talks, in the first part of the documentary, it talks about Putin's path to power, how he became, from his time in Germany as a KGB agent, some key details about his character. It just reveals lots of details are given that really paint a picture of him as a person, what type of person he is. So highly recommend this documentary. Then Navalny is a symbol of resistance to Putin. There are other politicians who tried to challenge Putin, but no one has been as lasting as Navalny under pressure. And this inspires awe, and but it also it's inspirational as well. Such a strong commitment. He's unique for his, maybe not completely unique. There are a few other uncompromising people, but he was in a position where he was kind of nudged in the direction of accepting some compromises, but he always refused them. He always refused dirty money. He refused alliances. He refused to back down when he was being urged to do so. Yeah, and of course, his willingness to risk his life to be with his people, his decision to return to Russia after poisoning, that's an incredibly powerful act, and which shows the depth of his commitment to his own people, that he chose. He always said that a politician needs to be with their own people, and he lived the values. He absolutely lived the values that he preached. Yeah, and even when he was in prison, he continued showing leadership. The text that he wrote, the direction that he set, almost every text that was published while he was in prison really attracted lots of attention and lots of discussion. I do want to also focus on the invasion of Ukraine and Alexei Navalny's position there, because it's really the most traumatic and problematic event that has happened. The decision of the Russian government that will have the most fateful consequences for the Russian people and for the Russian state. And Navalny did have things to say on this topic. First, I want to highlight this quote on imperialism. He said, "As ideas go, imperialism is the most noxious one of all for the Russian people. It destroys all life and inhibits normal development. We deserve a normal life, proper education, proper medicine, proper roads. It's not war we need to invest in, it's human capital." So this is what he said in a conversation with Polish dissident Adam Michnik in 2017. And then when the invasion started, he as soon as he was able to get a text out, this is one of the things that he said: "I'm urging everyone to take to the streets and fight for peace. If to prevent war, we need to fill up the jails and police vans, we will fill up the jails and police vans." So from prison, he was urging Russians to protest, and lots of Russians did listen to him and came out, and there were over 20,000 people who got arrested. A year after the start of the invasion, he published 15 theses on the war in Ukraine. It's a very important manifesto in which he outlined his vision of what this war means, what it is, and what's the way out of it. I'm not going to go through all of them, but I will highlight a few ones. So he puts in this short but very important text, he identified Putin as the real reason for the war. It's Putin's desire to hold on to power at any cost, and his obsession with his own historical legacy. That was the key driving force of that war. On the question of Ukrainian borders, which is a thorny subject because of the annexation of Crimea, and there are some people who believe that Crimea should be Russian. So Navalny said that Ukrainian borders are internationally recognized and defined in 1991. That's when the Soviet Union dissolved. Russia recognized those borders back then, and it must recognize them now. So he has been very unequivocal, very firm that all of the territories have to be returned. He says that Russia must leave Ukraine alone completely, stop the aggression and the war, and withdraw all troops from Ukraine. Then, in terms of compensation, he says that one way to achieve the compensation to Ukraine would be to lift restrictions imposed on oil and gas, but redirect some of that income from Russia to Ukraine. And basically, this hydrocarbon exports, they should be used towards reparations. Yeah, and he does say that all of the war crimes need to be investigated and in cooperation with international institutions. So, given how problematic all of this is, extremely problematic from the perspective of Putin's regime, and people get punished for a lot less than that. But Navalny was strong enough and committed enough and confident enough to say this even from prison. So what's left after Navalny's death? The Anti-Corruption Foundation, it's been in existence for 10 years. It's still strong. It's still publishing investigations which are hitting the oligarchs and corrupt officials really hard. There's also an opinion polling department. It was set up more than 10 years ago in 2013 for the mayoral campaign. But it's been doing fantastic work identifying public sentiment within Russia and really adjusting, targeting messages to the people. Over the past 2 years, an underground network was being set up. There's a whole IT infrastructure that's in place. Basically, it's on the dark web. It allows people to communicate without sharing their details. So it's completely safe. And there is a media organization that Navalny built, but it still exists. So the primary channel, it has 6.4 million subscribers and has 1.5 billion views by now. The second channel, Navalny Live, again 3.4 million subscribers. And then there's a channel that was set up just when the invasion of Ukraine started. It's called Popular Politics. It has a huge following as well. So all of these channels remain open, and this is what Navalny's team is continuing to use. So in terms of media production, something that happened literally a week ago. So Navalny's team published the first installment of a multi-part documentary about 1990s. It's called Traitors, and it basically tells the story of how the foundations of Putin's regime were built, not in 2000s, but in 1990s. It really shows how what deals Yeltsin made with the oligarchs and all the different kind of key players, how they participated in creating this very corrupt system with highly concentrated power. So this documentary, it's a fully featured documentary. The first episode was like 70 minutes. It exploded Russian discussion space. There are 4 million views already. Everybody, all of the opposition leaders, all of the kind of opinion leaders are engaged in a very heated discussion about the legacy of 1990s, and everybody, and it will continue. So basically, this is an example that even without Navalny, his team basically learned the skills, how to communicate with people, how to engage, what are the most powerful ideas that would attract the attention of the people. So his work is continuing. And then Yulia Navalnaya, his wife, who was not very public. She did appear at various rallies alongside him, but she never had a significant public profile on her own. But she, in just 2 months, she's shown that she's quite capable. She was literally, the day when the news broke that Alexei was killed, she was talking at the Munich Security Conference. A week later, she appeared in front of, she addressed the European Parliament. She met with David Cameron, Joe Biden, and she basically doing very well, like using the reputation, the capital that Alexei has built up. She inherited that, and she's continuing his work without the restrictions that he was under over the past 3 years. So she is free. She is able to communicate, build networks, and importantly, she is not just communicating with the Western leaders, but she is communicating really well with the Russians. The video addresses that she's made, they're really pitch perfect, and they're making a really powerful impression on people. So finally, I want to add with what I think makes Alexei Navalny unique. In Russian politics, we have lots of politicians, they're all fighting for power. But Alexei Navalny was denied a path to an office, a political office. So his fight was for the hearts and minds of the people. He created a vision for the so-called beautiful Russia of the future. And his goal was to inspire Russians to believe in that possibility of the beautiful Russia of the future and to fight for it, to work for it. He probably knew that he wouldn't be able to become president, he wouldn't be able to gain that power. But I think his goal, especially when he was in prison, his goal was to inspire people. And the response that we've seen to his death, I think it shows that he's been able to do that. That path to the beautiful Russia of the future, it's not clear. It's really hard to say how exactly what will need to happen to topple Putin. But I think there's still plenty of Russians who believe in the possibility. So that's all. Happy to take questions.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. That was most intriguing and a lot of detail. I can see how passionate you are about the subject.